Can I tell you what Bull's doing right now?
Just setting that up.
What?
He's setting the trap.
Yeah, that trap coming.
Myles Garrett, you better play. You better, Myles Garrett, you better break him in half. So, and here's why I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
He is going to have to play well.
He's got to kick some ass.
To me, if there's there's two players on this team that there will be no referendum on. Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb.
No.
They need to prove nothing to me.
Yes, they do, because Myles Garrett, in my opinion,
is only as good as his next game.
Myles Garrett's a great player.
Wonderful.
But Myles Garrett should be an all-time great player. And to this point in his career, he's not an all-time great player. He's just a great player.
I had this conversation with a buddy about a week ago.
Yes.
Hall of Famer right now?
No.
Trajectory?
Definitely
For me,
no.
is.
Oh, trajectory?
Trajectory. Obviously, if he retired today, no.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying trajectory.
I think.
Have you seen enough from Myles Garrett to say that if he can sustain this for a couple of more years?
Yeah. I think he's borderline. And he shouldn't be borderline for me. Now, maybe I got it wrong. I don't know.
What do you guys think?
As a defensive lineman, we did a blog on Locked On Browns podcast. I said, look, if he ends up today, he's probably a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's precedent. You got Terrell Davis, who had a very short period of time. You have Gale Sayers, very short period of time.
Now, they were at positions
that was at positions
with more stats.
The lifeline of those players is 3.5 years on average.
Now, the thing, if you look at it, all it takes is a Defensive Player of the Year, and he's in.
But he hasn't won that.
He hasn't won it.
And he should have by now.
He is the caliber of player who should have one by now.
Yes, and it's splitting hairs to some degree. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I think Myles Garrett should be a 10, and he plays like a 9.7, which is ridiculous because 9.7 is better than almost every other player.
You're saying he's got more potential.
I think there's another level, and I don't know if it's he's too nice.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if he just I don't know what it is.
Does he have a motor problem? Because when I watch T.J. Watt,
he's inconsistent.
The big conversation is Watt or Garrett. And it's really tough for me.
Yeah.
Especially when we showed the picture a while ago with Garrett with his shirt off on the response to the Baker Mayfield thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, this guy's a superhero. He should be playing football. Should be making movies.
Yeah.
When you see that, you're like, he should have 100 sacks a year.
Yes.
Now, and then I watch T.J. Watt, who physically is not as gifted.
Doesn't look like that.
But yet his motor is running at high RPMs on every single play.
I'm gonna tell you. Let me give y'all this.
He's had better talent around him.
This is what I feel. Myles Garrett just now, right, is just getting that swag back, right? Let me explain. When the helmet incident happened, we had a bunch of people. Like, he got to go to anger management. He almost killed somebody. Oh, my gosh. Like,
I wasn't saying anything.
Like, well, there's a lot.
Some people said throw him out of the league forever.
Throw him out of the league. When that happens, and then you remember, he had been getting a lot of penalties. They were giving him penalties for
he had a lot of
bad penalties.
By the way, Aaron Donald got a total pass because it happened in practice. Which
now,
is
for me, I think after that, he's still been dominant. He's still been a guy. But now what it takes is a little bit of time to get that edge back. You have to play defense. If you go watch any of the great defensive players, John Randall, you go watch Lawrence Taylor, these dudes are out there and they have bad intentions. You got to
play.
We don't care. You got to have that in your mindset.
I think the one knock on him is that there are times where I have to look and say, is he on the field?
Yeah.
I should never have to wonder, is he on the field?
Aaron Donald makes big plays in big moments all the time.
Well, they won the Super Bowl because of Aaron Donald.
100%.
The last 2 or 3 plays he made won the Super Bowl.
He doesn't get to Burrow on that last play. They probably throw a touchdown.
I agree.
But I agree.
Myles Garrett's got to be more consistent in those big moments.
I think Myles is on it this year because guess what he says? I'm the best.
Yeah.
Now, in fairness, when you compare a guy to Aaron Donald, you are comparing a guy to the highest bar possible.
But that's my bar for Myles Garrett. I don't think that's unfair.
Mean in the game today.
Period.
What Aaron Donald has done, I think most everybody that studies this for a living will agree, he did it better than anyone ever did.
I think that should be the bar for Myles Garrett, for me.
Wow.
I think it should be.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Lofty expectations.
Aditi is with us now, and she can settle this. And I agree with Adam, Aditi, that there's a special motivation for Myles Garrett in this first game against Carolina. We're trying to make a big thing out of the comments from Baker and trying to whoop everybody into like a fury over that. But do you think Myles Garrett can draw from this, and this is his time to shine? And it's sort of his team right now, if you think about it. I mean,
I think he needs to dominate this game.
What do you think, Aditi?
I think he needs to dominate the game for many, many, many reasons. I think to Adam's point, he's not. And it's funny, Adam, that you were saying that, because don't you remember, isn't that the conversation that my husband Matt had with you at your house about Myles Garrett and how, like, mellow he seemed off the field and
Yes.
all these varied interests. And I think that the phrasing that Matt actually used, Matt, my husband, was like, you would think that his testosterone is always here. And he was actually just like a regular guy to talk to.
Right.
So, but it's about the switch, right? It's about like what you turn on when you're on the field. And I said this on the radio this morning. I just think that Myles Garrett is a little bit more careful, a little more cagey, a little smarter about what he will publicly say. So we're not going to hear him sit here and say, oh, yeah, I want to take it to Baker. Or, oh, yeah, I want to have 4 sacks in this game. But you're lying to yourself if you don't think that that's what's churning underneath him.
Yeah,
I also think it really bothers him that TJ Watt was Defensive Player of the Year and that he wasn't. I think he really, truly believes that he is the guy that should be dominating this league.
That's right.
And why do we all talk about Aaron Donald in a different way when we talk about him? And Myles doesn't necessarily say it publicly, but I'll take you back 2 years ago when Aaron Donald was named Defensive Player of the Year. TJ Watt had no problem right away saying, okay, motivation for next year. And so isn't that what you want Myles Garrett to say?
Absolutely.
I will throw this out there.
Yeah.
I'm not old enough to answer this, but is Aaron Donald really more dominant than LT was?
He is in my book. It's a different game. Now,
Okay.
LT changed the sport. LT was quick, and LT was a linebacker who could put his hand in the dirt and could come after quarterbacks on the edge. But I just think at that position, for me, just an opinion, I watched a team win a Super Bowl last year because of plays he made in the clutch. And that, to me, is my definition of all-time great.
I mean, when you're debating
and I'd
LT versus Aaron Donald, it's
position
so
by
close.
what I do is I like to put them. I say the defensive tackle positions inside because it's different.
Right, yeah.
Outside 5 technique, and then Lawrence Taylor was more of an outside linebacker, stand-up rusher.
He was.
So you can parse, but as far as being dominant, he's right up there with LT as being one of the guys.
But I'm also, guys, for me, like to my feeling on this is, do you make everybody around you better? Because the game of football is the ultimate team sport. You are only as strong as your weakest link. It is about the puzzle pieces fitting together. And I'll take you back to last year. I remember having a conversation with Raheem Morris, who of course is the Rams defensive coordinator. And Raheem said that it's not just what you see on the field with Aaron Donald. It's that every Tuesday, every off day, Aaron Donald is in the building. It's that Aaron Donald is walking into everybody's meeting room to just go and sit and talk to them the same way that Cooper Kupp does that. He's talking about the way that Aaron Donald will rep that he can do in his sleep 52 times. And it's all the younger guys watching the best player on the team work that way and how it forces them to then work that way. And so there's more to it, which is why you sit here and it's like, yeah, okay, if I'm starting a team, I want Aaron Donald. Done.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction.
Yeah,
and I'll cross over to baseball for a second. But when Jose Ramirez is the team's best player, he also plays harder than everybody.
That's true.
There's a rub-off on 23 guys.
No
that
doubt.
watch
Young
that
guys,
every
especially
single young guys in particular. So
You see your star busting his ass on every play, you're going to do it too.
you are, and I know that there's a knock.
How do you
against-
not?
Yeah.
No, he's not. And one of the knocks against Myles is that, and I don't know that people should kill him for this. Is well, he's not a leader. He's not a vocal rah guy. I don't know where you guys stand on that, but this is football.
Yeah.
And I do want my best player to be that rah guy. And I know you can't just say I'm going to be a leader because I'm supposed to be.
But
Leaders are born.
I think he is a leader in a different type of way. Aditi, you would know better than me. But I remember last year, Myles Garrett called out the entire defense.
I love that.
You remember that? I
loved
can't even
when he
remember
did
what
it.
game it was.
I loved when he did
called
it.
out the defense and we got to get to the quarterback more, blah, blah, blah. And that next game, he dominated.
Yep,
he had
I
a
agree.
monster game, and I can't even remember what game it is now.
It was
but
late
I
in the
remember him
season.
talking.
It was later in the season.
Yes, and I remember him dominating and leading the way. And I felt like the whole team, if you could call
want
out your
more of that,
teammates.
Bull. I want more of that.
Right, that shows me leadership. But I've been saying, Aditi, that I think as great as Myles Garrett's been, I still think there's another level, and I think he should be held to, as great as Aaron Donald is, I think he should be held to the highest possible standard, and I think he needs a little more consistency in the big moments. That's it. I mean, he's great.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong in
Right.
saying that.
Yeah,
if
no.
Myles Garrett wants to end up in the Hall of Fame, if Myles Garrett wants to go down in history as the best defensive player ever, well, then, yeah, he's got to hit another level.
100%.
And it has
Yep.
nothing to do with public perception. It's exactly what you're saying. It's week in, week out, forcing teams to change what they're doing.
Right.
And it's being dominant to that point, and it's backing up your words. It's all of that. But I also think that Myles Garrett is poised for that in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with expectations? What's wrong with holding someone to a standard and saying, you know what, you've been this good, but we want to see you be this good now. And then we want to see you be this good. That's the reality of being the best at something.
Couldn't agree more. Hey, Aditi, we're talking cuts throughout the show, and there are reports out there of what the roster is going to look like. I'm sure you've seen them. Any surprises for you, or do you think there's still a move coming that might surprise fans?
Potentially, but I don't know. I think that right now this is still so fluid. We sit here and we look at today and what happens by 4 p.m. today, but every team is cutting 30 players. So there can still be a whole bunch of maneuvering. There can be guys who jump on a practice squad. There could be somebody tomorrow who gets hurt. So what happens, what you see today at, let's call it 4:15 p.m. is not necessarily what you're going to see week 1 down at Carolina. I wouldn't read too much into any of it. I would just say on a personal level, I hate today. Like I really, really, really do.
Yeah, we started the show
And I think
on
that
that
it's
note.
important for every single one of us to just remember that there are so many politics involved in all of this as well. Were you drafted by this regime? Were you not? What number of guys at this position do you need to keep? Sometimes you can be so much better than 3 guys who are on the roster, but you're older or you cost more or somebody isn't standing on the table for you. So what happens today is not necessarily a statement on who you are, and that translates into a million different professions. Jay, you and I can happily speak to that as well.
Yes, we can. It's
try
real.
To remember and have some heart.
And that's
all
what
I'd say.
that's how I started the show, Aditi, with that exact message. You know, we kind of salivate over this day in the media because it gives us a lot to talk about. But a third of the league essentially will watch their dream end today, and that's tough. There's a human element to that I always try to remind. And to your point about the politics involved, I ask myself all the time. So Mike Harley comes in here. He was undrafted, right? They signed him as a free agent. I loved what I saw from this kid. Saw from this kid. And you know what? If Harley wore Schwartz's jersey in the preseason and Schwartz wore Harley's jersey in the preseason, in a vacuum, that's an easy decision. Harley, he just passed the look test. He was better, but he's not on this team because he wasn't a draft pick. And we know how GMs love to hold tightly to their draft picks because they've got to prove that this guy can turn it around. And it drives me nuts.
Well, and some of it, you could say the same thing about Baldwin as well. Harley and Baldwin.
Absolutely.
But part of it also is maneuvering. Who's more likely to be able to be brought back onto a practice squad? You know, let's take John Kelly and Jerome Ford. Those were 2 really good young running backs. If you cut Jerome Ford, he's getting picked up by somebody else.
In a second.
But maybe John Kelly isn't. Same way, if you cut Schwartz, somebody might sit here and say, well, this guy has elite world-class speed. We're going to take a chance on him. You might have an easier chance sneaking Baldwin or Harley back onto your practice squad and keeping them within your organization.
Very true.
Sometimes it's about the maneuvering of that as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you made that point because you're absolutely right. And there are guys that are going to be released that will be on either this team or will be on the teams that release them tomorrow or 2 days from now. It's just you got to let the dust settle and follow the moves.
Aditi, I'm gonna talk about this. Your boy Josh Dobbs. I like him. If you have a situation where Jacoby Brissett does not play well, do you think they have the confidence to, give Josh Dobbs an opportunity to come in and play? Because Jimmy G is off the board. That ship has sailed.
No. I think Josh is there to be the backup quarterback. He is sort of the security if, heaven forbid, something happens to Jacoby Brissett. I think fans that are sitting here saying, oh, Josh Dobbs played better than Jacoby Brissett, nothing happens in a vacuum. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But I will say this. It's funny because I was on the sidelines Sunday at the Steelers game, and I talked about this with Mike Sullivan, the Steelers quarterbacks coach. I talked about it with multiple people on the Steelers staff. I talked about it with several Steelers players. Everybody loves Josh Dobbs. I mean, they really do. It is so hard not to root for this guy. And I was telling Mike Sullivan how you see whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Deshaun Watson coming off the sideline, immediately sitting down next to Josh Dobbs and kind of looking at the tablet with him. And Mike Sullivan, the Steelers quarterbacks coach, who of course was the quarterbacks coach of the Giants all those years ago with Eli Manning and won a Super Bowl, obviously. He was saying that's how Ben Roethlisberger was, that Ben Roethlisberger trusted Josh Dobbs' eyes more than anybody else, that even though Mason Rudolph was the number 2, Ben would come off and want to talk to Josh. What did you see? What do you think there?
In fairness, no one wants to talk to Mason Rudolph.
Please call him the Great Gazoo. That's his appropriate name.
Tom said he's not trading him unless he gets a ton of something back in return. But
and Ben,
you know what? I'm so happy for Josh because Josh hasn't been lights out on the practice field. You watch him on the practice field and you're like, what is going on? But when the lights come on in the stadium, he's certainly done what you wanted him to do. He's created a level of energy that's infectious on the sideline. I mean, when he dove over that pylon, the way that sideline erupted, I just, it's fun. And again, to the point, Jay, that we were making about let's remember that the guys that cut are human beings who have families and you feel for them. Sometimes there are guys like Josh that you just can't help but get excited and pleased for a young man like that and for his family, for his mom and dad.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Do you think we might see? Mike. Do you think we might see a trade? If you had to bet, the Browns make a trade for a defensive tackle. Do they make a trade for a wide receiver? Do you think they do something, even if it's small? Do you see them doing something in the next 24 hours or so?
I mean, I think it's always possible, but I don't know that I'm sitting on the edge of my seat as in, oh my gosh, here it's about to come. I think there's hope for those young defensive tackles. I mean, they're young, they're hungry, they're physical, and I appreciate that piece of them. I think that some of them need some reps and need some consistency. I think Perrion Winfrey, for example, is a guy that's got a lot of dog in him. And I love the way that he's going to Gerald McCoy every day and asking for tips and trying to get better. He just needs to get consistent. And a lot of times we need the reps to get there. I mean, my first year on TV, I was horrible.
You were never horrible, Aditi.
It took reps to get consistent and get better.
And by the way, I'm going to call myself out. That's actually a stupid question because who the hell would know if they're going to make a trade? I mean, how could you know that? It's all minor.
Wow, don't beat yourself up for that, man.
She hears that.
It's a stupid question. Nobody really knows that. It's a dumb question. People shouldn't ask that.
No. But to be fair, let's say
Yeah.
Andrew Berry texts me and says, "Hey, Aditi, a trade is coming." You think I'm going to tell you? If you
No.
told me,
You know what? We're friends. You should at least text me privately and tell me to keep it under my hat.
First of all, are you
would I
telling us
trust
here
you?
that
Trust me to keep it
Yeah, that
under
was a
your hat?
flex. Did anyone else pick
Aditi,
up on that?
Are you telling us that Andrew Berry would text you and say, Aditi, we're thinking about making a trade, or we got a trade coming?
I think she's saying
would
he
do
did.
that?
I think she's saying he did.
Come on. We've already had some reporting questions this morning from one of my wonderful, fabulous friends, Cynthia Freeland. I don't
She's
want to
awesome.
get into that.
We had her on the show.
She was on with us.
You know she came on the show with us, right?
Oh, good. Yeah. I was
And-
on the phone with her this morning, and she said, Jay, you were texting her.
I was. So I want to ask you, Aditi, because she did change the narrative to me in that originally when she told the story on the podcast, she had said, go kick their ass or whatever. She bleeped that ass out. And then he had said, I'm going to F them up. When she came on the show with us, she said, when I saw him, I was excited to see him. I told him, go kick some ass. And then she said, I also told them to go F them up. And she said she was referring to the 17 opponents, not specifically the Browns. And then Baker just repeated what she said. I'm gonna F them up. To me, that changes really the bones of the story. Does it to you?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it of course does. And that's exactly what she said to me on the phone this morning when, I called her because obviously it blew up. And I said this on the radio to our friend Ken Carmen this morning that I didn't want to put any context on it until I actually talked to Cynthia and found the whole context of the conversation. That's exactly what she said to me, that she was just excited to see him and she was having kind of a one-off conversation with him, like, hey, I'm pumped for you, go do this. And I think this is one of those things where, our world has changed a little bit. I have the utmost respect for Cynthia, not just as a friend, but for what she does. Her day-to-day job, her day job is as a brilliant statistician and data analyst, she works in studio. She's not necessarily a person who every single day is out in the field getting quotes and parsing what quotes do we share and thinking about,
That's a good point.
okay, what are the
Great
repercussions
point,
of this? Should I paraphrase this? Should I soften this in some way? And so I think she just got excited and didn't necessarily recognize that this could be twisted or turned or used in a portion. And look, we've all experienced this. I mean, I've experienced this a million times. I've said something and then it's been taken in a right turn and it was like, wait a minute, that's not how I meant that at all, or that isn't the full context of it. So I think the headline here is, what else do you expect Baker to say? What else do you expect Baker to feel? Whether he says it publicly or not, you better believe that, I mean, the guy's not a robot. Of course he wants to take it to his old team. It's what he did at Oklahoma when he faced Texas Tech. And again, even though Myles Garrett is never going to say to us, oh yeah, I want to sack that guy 18 times, you better believe and you better hope that every night when Myles Garrett is going to bed, he's saying, I want to sack that guy 18 times to himself.
The truth is,
so like, it just feels like a non-story in some ways.
But the truth is, though, in the end, I don't have a problem with what Baker said. I don't have a problem that Cynthia said, because you made a great point. I don't think any of us looked at it from that angle, that she's not really an on-field reporter. That's not her day job, right? So she's not used to trying to decide what to say and what to say. She thought it was a completely harmless, let's get him type of thing. And she said today with us, she probably shouldn't have said it. That's fine. Everybody should move on. Not a big deal. But it still could be used by the Browns as extra motivation, whatever, bulletin board material, and that's fine. I'm okay.
I mean,
with that.
fine, but again, like, to that point, I sit here and I say, you're a national football player. Okay?
Agreed.
Agreed.
You don't need it, but don't guys
really
do
need
that?
some words to get jacked up?
So what, are they going to try harder now, Bull?
No, but then why do we say all the time that guys don't care about guys care about bulletin board material? It's brought up all the time. I'm not the first person to bring it up.
Stories because we love like going.
So you don't think that factors in at all, G? Do you think that factors in at all?
I told y'all how I felt, man.
It's a little different.
A lot of time, this story to me it happens like. She comes out, she's like, yo, that's my man. Like, this is what I get frustrated.
No.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm frustrated about, what she's frustrated about is she's like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
At what point can I say that's my guy and I want to see him do good?
Yeah.
It ain't no story.
No, but I think what Bull's asking you about, and this is, I think, what Aditi's drilling
is
down
there
on.
really such a thing as bulletin
They
board
were going to try 99.7, and now they're going to try 99.9.
Well,
we've talked about this a million times. Should we never talk about it again? Is it not true?
What I'm saying to you is, as you come full circle, what she said has no bearing on how Myles Garrett or anybody else is going to go hard. They already know. They already know what it is. And you think people don't like Baker in the locker room, and Baker don't like them. Let's get it.
So I'm never talking about bulletin board material. If it has no meaning,
No,
but
you know what? Guys, I think this is such like, for people who care, it's such an interesting little insight into sort of like how the sausage is made, how we do our jobs, whether I share what Andrew Berry says to me or not. What piece of what Kevin Stefanski says do I share? And I'll give you a perfect example. It's CBS. So I'll be a sideline reporter at this game, at this Panthers-Browns game. And the rules have been laid out for me. I'm standing on the sideline. I am right behind or next to the Panthers bench. If Baker Mayfield comes off the field, let's say that his O-line lets up 3 sacks in a row, okay? Let's say that happens. And Baker comes to the line, and he screams at his linemen, and he says, guys, we got to clean this up. We have to whatever. I'm not allowed to go on camera and say, Baker said X.
I didn't know that.
But you could text me.
No, I'm allowed to sit here and say, a very demonstrative Baker Mayfield came to the sideline. He gathered his offensive linemen. He was fired up. He had some words for them. But I am technically, in exchange for being allowed to be on the sideline, I'm not allowed to repeat exactly what his words were.
And that's not just a CBS thing. That's league-wide.
Will you secretly text me and give me the information, Aditi? Will you
No, she will not.
Every time I don't think the NFL can be more dictatorial, though. They're just like, if
by
you
the
hear
way,
anything bad, you're not allowed to talk about it.
But however, we've talked about this
access,
before.
I get it.
It's the trade-off for the access. So it's Aditi's job
to
set the tone on the Panthers bench. she can't eavesdrop on a conversation. And I'm not even saying in that case it would have been eavesdropping. If he shouts it, she hears it.
Right.
But what she's not allowed to do is then say, Baker just said, and then repeat a quote.
Yeah, right.
You're just not allowed to do that. And in part, this is because of the relationship between the league and the networks that cover it. It's all one piece.
Right.
And there are rules of engagement that the players will not tolerate being broken.
True.
And that's
Aditi,
one of them.
I'm curious,
Well, and also,
though.
Jay, they need to have, look, this is their work environment. And
Right.
so they need to have faith
Right.
and trust that part of their work environment is sacred or not for public consumption. I'll give you another example. This was a moment on the sideline, and I actually used it in the broadcast on Saturday that I found very jarring. We talked about Anthony Schwartz earlier. So even after all the drops, there was that pick where Anthony Schwartz, that interception, Jacoby Brissett was intercepted, and it was kind of like Anthony Schwartz got picked off and fell down, and that led to the interception. So I'm behind the Browns bench, and eventually I see Anthony Schwartz walk over to Jacoby Brissett, and he essentially apologizes. I don't know what his exact words were, but we're kind of like, that was on me, my bad. And then Deshaun Watson pulled Anthony Schwartz aside. And I saw Deshaun Watson take at least 3 or 4 minutes and kind of explain to Schwartz what he could have done better, how he should have handled that, the way that he should have moved his body. I thought it was really notable. I thought it was a show of how both of these quarterbacks are taking ownership of this team, how both of these quarterbacks are leading this team, how Deshaun Watson, even though he's going to be gone, actually starting today, he still wants to be involved in the growth and development of this team. But I did not tell you exactly what Deshaun Watson said to Anthony Schwartz. So it's my job to paint the picture and tell you that bigger story, but I can't tell you what Deshaun said.
I'm curious, if you heard somebody on the sideline admit to cheating, say something racist, say something homophobic, I don't know, something like way over the line in any of those things, what would you do?
Tuck that.
You can't do anything?
I don't know. I haven't been in that position yet, so thank goodness I haven't been in that position. But I have certainly, I will say this, in the course of my being a reporter, just standing in a locker room or talking to people, I have most definitely heard inappropriate off-color things.
Sure.
And not done anything with them because, again, it's someone's workplace. You know, like there are certain things that I believe are not meant for public consumption. I mean, Adam, you and I have done it. We've had private conversations where we've said things and I've said, please don't share that this is what I'm saying about, you know, whoever it may be about. And let me make clear, neither Adam nor I have said anything racist or sexist or homophobic when saying these things.
Wouldn't tell us if you did, apparently.
There are conversations that we have about personal feelings that you don't necessarily want shared.
I'll share a quick story about how players view that space. So it's the locker room. In baseball, it's the dugout. In football, it's the sidelines. You may remember in the mid-'90s when the Indians were a powerhouse. I was standing 2 feet from it. I watched the whole thing go down. Hannah Storm, who later became a co-host with me, was getting ready to interview Kenny Lofton before one of the preseason games, and she had set up in the dugout, and she was actually sitting on the back high of the dugout, which is where the players a lot of times will sit. She was waiting for Kenny Lofton to come. The NBC camera was set up. The producer was there. Albert Bell comes in from taking infield, outfield, and he sees her sitting there and erupts and drops F-bombs. Get out of my dugout. This is my office. This is my space. In general, I think, Aditi, you might co-sign this. Players are uncomfortable with people in their space in general, just as we would be uncomfortable. Imagine if there were 3 reporters sitting in those empty chairs right now, reporting on what we do. I mean, we might tolerate it and treat them like human beings.
Probably better than Albert Bell would.
Yeah, now Albert Bell was an idiot.
I don't know if we should use him as an example.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is there were a lot of players that went up to Albert and said, that's our space.
I think
so. I
think that's a ridiculous reaction by Albert Bell.
No, but I
was standing right there.
I think that there are some rules. You know, Jay, you tell this story, and I'm remembering being, 23 years old in the Mets clubhouse, and Cliff Floyd It was a long rain delay before a game. Cliff Floyd pulled up one of those stools. The guys all had stools in front of their locker, and he and I were having a conversation, and it wasn't like an interview. I think we were actually talking about whether he refrigerates red wine, of all things, the things that I remember in my head. Anyway, we were talking about how he likes his red wine chilled, and he pulled up a stool and said, sit down. So here I am, I'm 23 or 24 years old. I was probably wearing sandals and a dress. He was thinking, we've been standing here forever. We're having a conversation. Let me be polite, pull up a stool. I sat down on the stool. I was later taken to task by several veteran male reporters who said, you don't do that. You do not get to be comfortable. It is their space. Yep. They are allowing us in there to do our jobs, but don't act like you belong there on a regular basis.
But he invited you to sit down.
He did,
thinking,
but
well, if the player pulled the stool out for me, what am I supposed to do? I never sat on a stool again.
Yeah, no, she's right. There are these unwritten rules of engagement between journalist and player. There are a lot of lines, and Aditi, I'm sure you've seen reporters cross those lines, and it's tough to know what the rules are and where the lines are because they're constantly moving, but I can see how there would be players. Where I thought you were going was a player may have come up to you and said, what are you doing sitting on one of our stools? These are for us. And I didn't even think you were going to go the reporter route.
I was lucky that clubhouse, I was very lucky that clubhouse was, they were great actually. And that's what's so funny. This is another random segue, but like when people think you're a fan of somebody, I grew up a Yankees fan and I loved being in that Mets clubhouse. Like Julio Franco was 50 years old in there and was fantastic, and Pedro Martinez and Bobby Wagner, and, as a young writer, these guys were fantastic to me. And the Yankees clubhouse was so buttoned up and strict and corporate. It was a totally different thing.
By the way, when I was doing play-by-play in the minor leagues.
Anyway, I don't know why I took that hard left turn. I apologize.
That's all right.
It's interesting insight. I think it's fascinating.
When I was doing
we're not really fans. We're fans of good people, and we're fans of good stories. That's it.
Aditi, I'll tell my boring story. When I was doing play-by-play in the minor leagues, I sat in the dugout all the time. Nobody said squat to me.
No, because you were part of the team. And
so I'm the play-by-play guy.
Aditi, to that point,
and you were covering like the New Haven crab catchers.
Yeah, but
watch.
Aditi, when you're in that role, you were just in that role. You're flying on the team plane. They look at you as friendly media. And they embrace you more than you would be embraced. And you do a wonderful job of breaking down people's tensions. But so I can't imagine anybody mistreating you or making you not feel comfortable. But I also can't imagine a situation where you'll ever feel as comfortable as you did both with the Steelers, because that was your regular beat, and more particularly with the Browns, because you were behind the enemy line with them, really.
Well, and I do, it's funny that you say that. I wonder about that because, of course, I pride myself on having good relationships. I don't think anybody with the Bengals a year ago or, the Ravens or the Steelers, whoever it is, has ever thought like she's a rabble rouser or she's a weasel, or she's lying, or, and I've told this story before, John Harbaugh is my favorite coach in the league. Sorry, Kevin, but John Harbaugh is my favorite coach in the league. And if I were an NFL player, I'd want to play for John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh didn't talk to me for a year. Like he was so angry at me for one whole year. And it was because I was reporting things that he openly admitted were completely correct. He just hated that I had this information.
He didn't like hearing them.
He hated that you were good at your job. That's what he hated. And that's an okay reason to hate somebody.
But my point is, I think that in general, most people that I deal with will say that I'm fair. Whether they like it or not, they know that I'm not looking to nitpick. But I did actually wonder, because Saturday night with the Browns was especially fun. I had this interview with Greg Newsome where I openly teased him about the way he said acclimate. And we just were hysterically laughing. And then I did this interview with John Johnson and Anthony Walker that went completely off the rail. I'm still laughing. We were laughing so hard doing it. And then, as everybody knows at this point, my first two assignments for CBS are as the sideline reporter for the Browns-Panthers telecast and then for the Jets-Browns telecast.
Yes.
Well, I'm working for CBS. I am not working for the Browns. My job in those two games will be to report the game down the middle as factually as possible.
And I have no doubt you will.
If Jacoby Brissett looks horrible and his teammates go ape on him on the sideline, I'm going to have to report it.
Right.
And I was actually thinking this, Jay, like the guys have been so great to me. Does anything change when I'm suddenly not wearing a brown shirt?
No, because they understand that that's your job.
They're smart enough to recognize what the job is.
You know what? The people that you want to understand that will understand that. That's
Just
your job.
don't sit on a stool when you're working for CBS. Don't sit on that stool.
Stools are for clothes.
Do not sit on that stool.
And Aditi, I bet you if John Harbaugh was on with us right now, I'm pretty confident he would tell me that you're terrific at your job and probably that you're one of his favorites too. But that's how John has to be in that role. And he's doing what he has to do.
I love that you're complimenting her on behalf of other people now.
He got it down to a T, don't he?
I think he'd say he loves your hair.
I told
think he'd say he likes that top.
Man, boy, I tell you what.
You know John. Am I off base on that assumption? Because that's who John is.
No, you know what? And this is why I said I'd want to play for him. I'll tell you this: when I left the NFL Network, one of the nicest, best, most encouraging messages that I got was from John Harbaugh.
See there?
And he has indeed checked in a couple of times. Hey, how are you doing? What's going on? And I'm sorry to say it in Cleveland, and I'm sure they don't want to hear it, but the Ravens organization, I just think top to bottom is so tremendous.
It is the blueprint.
Huge
Yeah, we hate it. You're right. We agree. We hate it.
I hope they enjoy third place this year.
I'm going to tell a quick story before we say goodbye on John Harbaugh. So his parents, Jack, who is a great coach, and his wife, I think Jack's wife is Jackie. They met at Bowling Green. That's where I met my wife. So you're in a club called the Falcon Flames when you meet your spouse there. So laugh if you will. Laugh if you will. But it's really kind of nice. Like this was 35 years ago. I still get a Valentine's Day card every year from Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Saying Happy Valentine's Day to our Falcon Flames. Anyhow, I was talking to the Harbaughs about this at a World Series game in 2016. We were sharing space, and I said, meeting you guys, they're so lovely. I go, you guys are wonderful people. John is a wonderful, not just coach, but person, human being. And then I paused, and Jack Sr. looked at me like he knew it was coming, and I go, what the hell happened to Jim? And they both laughed, and they both said, we hear that a lot. But it's so true.
Oh my
Jim is
God.
just, and
He's a handful.
Jim's just not like Jack, like John.
Right.
He's just a different, different guy.
I know you want me to go, but I have to add one more to that. So early in my career, obviously everybody knows I live in Pittsburgh, but I covered the league for the NFL Network. The last few years, I really have honed in on the AFC North. But John Harbaugh was once asking me a question about Mike Tomlin. And I was just like, do you guys just like really actually despise each other? Do you hate each other? And he was kind of talking about how pretty much like in the league at that time, it's really hard to have best friends who are other NFL head coaches, especially guys you compete against twice a year. And so I'm telling him this story about Andy Reid and Tom Coughlin. Now, there really was just so much mutual respect. And this one year when Andy Reid had Mike Vick and Vince Young, and just the year started really badly, and Tom Coughlin could not stop praising Andy Reid, and Andy Reid actually choking up hearing what Tom Coughlin had said about him. And so John Harbaugh says, and this at this time Jim was with the 49ers, John Harbaugh says to me, those are probably the only two guys that would ever actually talk about each other that way and treat each other that way and feel that way about each other. Like, I just don't see that happening with anybody else.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, wait a minute. So like you hate every NFL coach? I was like, what about Jim? Like you can't even hate Jim, can you? And John looks at me and he goes, sometimes I do.
He's easier to hate than most.
I mean, I just think it's natural, right?
By the way,
right.
remember the movie Grumpy Old Men with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon?
Yeah.
I could picture Andy Reid and Tom Coughlin doing like that movie. Like Tom Coughlin, they're in the winter. Tom Coughlin's cheeks are purple. Andy Reid's wearing his Hawaiian shirt, even though it's negative 50 degrees.
Right.
Like, can't you picture the two of them doing?
I think, what I want to see? I want to see the two of them with a reality show after they're done coaching.
Yeah, that would be good.
After Andy leaves,
I'd watch.
That'd be great.
Thanks,
Aditi.
Aditi.
It's not that we want to get rid of you. Trust
It's
me.
1 o'clock.
It's that we're
We gotta
up
go
against
home.
the end of our show.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
would sit
well,
here
I'll
and
see
talk
you
to you
guys
till
later
4
in the
o'clock if you would.
And so would
We'll see
John
each other
Harbaugh.
Bye, Aditi.
Don't tell him I said that because I don't want him mad at me again.
That's
Okay.
officially off the record.
Off
What's
the
on the
record.
internet.
I already tweeted it.
See
Bye,
ya.
Aditi.
I'll
Bye,
text you.
Aditi.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Aditi. So.